Namaskaraha and welcome to our next session on the yogic life. So far we've talked about the various stages of implementing the various aspects of the yogic life, right? So what is the Manav Dharma, and what is it to be a human being, what it means to exist, where we came from, the Srishti Chakra, the universe, what our existence means. So these are all the things that we have learnt so far. But ultimately, all of these things have no value if they are just confined to theory, right? So all this that we learnt is not just a pustakiya jnana. The yogic life means practical implementation, right? Practical implementation of everything that we have learnt, and which will ultimately result in the union of the unit entity with the cosmic, the union of the finite with the infinite. So in the process of implementing the practical aspects of yogic life, right, so initially we have to use anushasanam, which is discipline, and then abhyasah, which is habit, and then swabhavah becomes nature. So when you're engaging in the yogic life, these are the phases. Initially when you're very new to it, so then you have to exercise force, discipline, and then slowly you get practice with it, and then finally it becomes your swabhava, right? So we see that discipline is required, any time a new aspect of yogic life, whether it be the dietary changes, getting rid of oil, sugar, or dairy products, or company products, or not going to restaurants, all of those things. If somebody is used to those things for several years, then in the beginning when you're trying to make the change, then it can be overwhelming, right? It is not immediately pleasing to the mind, as the mind is used to those things. It's very similar to if somebody has been drinking alcohol or smoking cigarettes or eating meat. So they have a habit of doing those things which they got so used to, and they started liking it, and the notion of stopping, right, it becomes almost like it becomes very difficult, right? So actually it does help us to generate sympathy for people who are stuck in such things as cigarettes or alcohol, right? So they actually like those things. So when they were 5 years old, they did not like cigarette or alcohol, right? When they were born, it's not like that they were born with a cigarette in their mouth, right? So they did not like, when they were 5 years old, they had no liking for cigarette, alcohol, none of it. But then when they were 20, they started doing those things, and then they started developing a liking for those things, and then it becomes difficult to stop. Then it is not easy to stop. So that is why in the first phase, we call it as anushasanam, discipline. So discipline is needed because these changes, the yogic lifestyle changes that we're talking about, they are not immediately attractive to the mind, right? So that is why you have to use anushasanam, discipline. Then after that, one becomes accustomed to it, right? Then one's likings and dislikings gradually change, and one comes to develop a habit of not doing that. So even in the case of like exercise, right, initially people may not like doing exercise in the beginning, right? It's not appealing, but ultimately people, when they engage in it for some time, then they start to like it. Then ultimately in the end it becomes one's nature. So so we talk about liking or not liking in the anushasanam phase, right? It is initially it's a feeling that we get attracted to these different things, what our likings and dislikings are. They haven't changed, right? So intellectually we like that we liked a particular idea and we are stuck with it. And when we learn the yogic life and we learn that we have to stop taking oil, I should stop taking dairy products, I should stop taking salt, I should stop taking sugar, right? Slowly you learn all those things, and then when you implement all of those things, and over a period of time you start having an appreciation for all of these things, you'll realize that, oh, these are all the wrong habits. You'll see all those positive changes in your body, right? So the energy that you get, energy for doing different things, right? So initially it didn't seem appealing to you, but you used force to implement those changes, and when you implement those changes, then your likings all change, and then you start liking these things, and you see the positive impact these changes have on your body and mind, and then you get established in that process, right? So human beings are predominantly, they are mind predominant beings, right? We are man pradhan jeev, right? We are man pradhan. So it is the mind that is thinking that this is a good thing, and it is also the mind that is used to these wrong things. So the body may be eating those things, the body may be doing the exercise, but it is the mind within which there is a liking or a dislike, that which is appreciating intellectually as a concept, but which is not liking when it comes down to the practice of it, right? So it's all in the mind, right? So we talked about the anushasana, abhyasa and swabhava. So there is also another way of categorizing all of this, which is the stages of spiritual progress, right? And those are divided into 4 categories: yatamana, yatireka, ekendriya, vashikara, right? So whether in in the first phase, right, the first phase that we talked about, the anushasanam, right, that is another way of classifying that is yatamana. So there's a particular type of effort which is required, that is yatate, prayatate, yat dhatuhu, tarhi yatamanaha. Yatamanaha is the first phase in the spiritual development, and that includes all the different things that we've been talking about, right? So somebody just started to do asanas, they just learned sadhana, they started to do sadhana, they starting to do the nirjal upavasa, they never skipped a meal in their whole life, right? So the moment you tell them nirjal upavasa, they have never skipped one meal in their life, and this notion of nirjal upavasa is not pleasing to them, it's not appetizing to them, right? It's not taking food for an entire 36 hours. So all those things require effort, require prayatnaha, right? That is the part of the first phase, which is the yatamana phase, right? They start doing sadhana, they start sitting in padmasana, they have never sat in padmasana before, their knees start hurting, right? Their back is hurting, they're not used to sitting properly with a straight back. So these are all the physical aspects, right? There are physical aspects, there are psychic aspects, right? Like for instance, somebody is starting to exercise every day, right? They're starting to run every day, and they're getting pain in their muscles, right? So the mind doesn't want to do it, the body doesn't want to do it. So ultimately, when we look at that particular situation, it is ultimately the mind that is the driver behind it, right? Even if it's a physical thing, right? The knees are hurting, back is hurting in sadhana, but how long the mind is going to tolerate that? That is the question. So here, the mind has a very important role. Mind is the driver behind all of this. The mind is the driver behind the whole thing. Mind is the driver behind the desire to make the change, and behind the success or failure. So that is why we say mana eva manishyanam karanam bandhamokshayoho, bandha tu vishaya sangi muktah nirvishayam tata. So in this shloka we can understand very clearly that mind is the karana for bandha and is the karana for moksha. So that is what we are saying, that mind is the driver behind the whole thing, right? Mind is the driver behind the desire to make a change and behind the success or failure in that effort. So in the very initial stage, when one's inner eyes open, right, in terms of the desire to know that infinite entity, right? So there are many people who may speak about the subject, right? Nirjalopvasa, they may speak about it, but they may not implement it. But there are other people who have absolutely no interest in it, zero interest. That means we can say their eyes have not opened, right? Their eyes have not really not opened. That is that desire, that they have the desire to know that infinite, right? So in the first stage, we can say in the first stage it is extremely difficult. It's a difficult stage. The first stage, the mental propensities are all directed towards the chitta, right? It's directed towards the chitta. It is a very difficult stage. The chitta is always constantly attracted to the worldly objects, right? And the difficulties arise from both outside and from inside also. The mind is also wavering, right? There are internal difficulties because the mind is not trained and the mind behaves like a wild animal, right? So for a moment you're able to control, and then again it goes dashing like a broken horse, right? Like an unbroken horse. So external troubles also arise from friends and relatives who would not like you doing all of these things, right? They have an objection to that. They fear that what are you doing? Are you going to become a sannyasi? You renounce the world, right? So there are external pressures and also there are internal distractions, right? So that is why in the initial stages it requires patience and steadfastness, right? Then only you can move forward. If you don't have patience and you're not dedicated, you cannot move forward. That is the first stage, which is the stage of yatamana, that you just got to know about the yogic life and you entered it and you started doing sadhana, you learned sadhana and you're doing it, and you're seeing that your mind is restless and it's directed towards the chitta, it is directed towards the external objects. That is quite a natural phase because you've never used to doing sadhana before, right? Till the point in time when you first started doing sadhana, you never realized that your mind was so restless, right? You were you actually took pride in saying that I'm multitasking from one thing to another, and I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and I'm doing 10 different things. You took pride in saying I'm a very good multitasker. But then when you sit down for sadhana for the first time, you realize that you're not able to focus your mind on a single thing, right? Your mind is constantly wavering. Till that point in time you never realize that your mind is so wavering, right? So that is the first initial phase. So then in the second stage, there is a Vyatireka stage, right? The propensities are all, the mental propensities are all directed from the chitta to aham tattva, the doer I, right? This stage is comparatively, compared to the yatamana stage, it's less trying, right? And occasionally it is pleasing, right? In the first stage, it was not pleasing to your mind, right? You were like constantly trying to, challenge it. And in the second phase, what happens is that after doing it for a continuous period of time, it started to please you, right? The wild horses, right, that were going this side and that side, have been controlled to some extent, have been partially tamed, right? So the mental propensities now follow the direction from, they go inwards, they're going from chitta to aham tattva, right? So in this phase, in the Vyatireka phase, the sadhaka who is doing sadhana, he enjoys bliss, he gets glimpses of bliss, right? The tears of such bliss may actually roll down his cheeks, right? In this phase, he's more established. The external pressures are also reduced because the friends and relatives, they've all come to understand that nothing can be done about this person, right? They've understood that this person is really interested and he's a sadhaka, he's steadfast, right? So they also leave him alone, right? So that is the stage of Vyatireka. So you have actually progressed from the yatamana stage to the Vyatireka stage. And then in the third stage, Ekendriya stage, it is there is a further, the mental propensities are moving from the aham tattva to mahat tattva, right? So as the name implies, Ekendriya means the sadhaka gains control over some single propensity or organ, right? So in the stage, the sadhaka could get siddhis, he could get siddhis, even though we need to be clear that, we are not doing sadhana for siddhis, right? So that is, siddhi is not the goal of life. The occult powers, by doing sadhana, the occult powers, they're called as vibhuti, or they're called as aishwarya in Sanskrita, right? Is the, yeah? Do you have any questions, Mode? Chandrasekhar?
No, I'm sorry. I accidentally.
Okay. So that is, they get the occult power, which is called as the vibhuti, right? It is a supernatural power gained from the practice of sadhana, right? So there are 8 vibhutis: anima, lagima, mahima, praptihi, ishitva, vashitva, prakamya, antaryamitva, right? So this is actually a great progress. However, this is also a very dangerous stage, right? In the ekendriya stage, it is a dangerous stage, because the danger comes more from inside than from outside. The sadhaka can get intoxicated with the siddhis, right? And he can get intoxicated with the siddhis, and he may be tempted to use them. He may be like, let me see, what happens, right? And also there is also an external threat where somebody who has come to know that he has siddhis, they may provoke him to use it and abuse it, right? So then if a sadhaka who starts using the siddhis, he is actually misusing those powers, right? Then it leads to adogati, it leads to patanam, there is a downfall from the spiritual journey, because always one should remember that the goal of life is Paramapurusha, not the siddhis, right? So when the sadhaka starts abusing these powers, then it leads to adogati. It leads to adogati. He has fallen from the path of spirituality, right? So the sadhaka needs to have a control. He needs to realize what is the goal of life. The goal of life is not the siddhis. So that is the third stage, the ekendriya stage, where the sadhaka has progressed to a great extent. And then the fourth and the last stage of sadhana is the vashikara, right? So in that stage, all the mental propensities are completely directed from the Mahatattva towards the original ultimate self, right? That is, the sadhaka is established in his svabhava and the swarupa, right? So vashikara, vash means to be in control. All the propensities, all the mental propensities, all the mental vrittis are completely under control, right? All the worldly friends and relatives have already deserted the sadhaka, right? Because they've realized that other people are all involved in the worldly things. Excuse me. They're involved in the worldly things, and they see they don't see any value from the sadhaka, so they just leave the sadhaka. And sadhaka has also progressed so much ahead spiritually that he is there only to do jagat hit and for atma moksha. Therefore he has absolutely no interest in the worldly things, right? So as he progresses in the last stage, in the vashikara stage, finally becomes merged in that permanent paramapurusha, parabrahma, in the self, right? So essentially so we should, a sadhaka should not pray for worldly power, should not pray for this and that, right? So Paramapurusha is sarvagnya, he knows everything. There is no need to ask anything, right? So these are the different stages that one goes through, right? In the yatamana stage, the anushasana is very important, right? Because everything is new to you, and you have started to implement the various aspects of yogic life, and right, the initial stages, the body and mind is not used to it, so there is some resistance, right? And this is and it's also important to know, and this is a stage where a lot of people actually fall from the path, right? They're not able to keep up with it. They fall from the path, and only the dhiras, the wise, the truly wise, the buddhiman, we'll actually progress in this first stage, right? This stage is actually a very new stage, right, where you are not used to any of it, so there is a lot of resistance from inside and from outside. So it needs perseverance and strength to progress further. So only when your mind becomes open and when your inner eyes have opened, right, then the person becomes open to these things and realizes that these things are all good, right? So essentially you're learning everything and you're implementing all of these things in your life, right? So even though there is resistance, you're actually using discipline to implement all of these things, and over a period of time these all become very, very natural, right? So then it is actually a determination that I'm not going to take, I'm not going to go to a restaurant, right? And then you're going to workplace, and then you have some restaurant right next to the workplace, and you had in the past eaten a lot there, right? So in the yatamana phase there may be a temptation for you to go there and go and taste the food. So that is where you need to use the anushasana, discipline, right? Mind wants to go there, wants to take the food there and get some relief, right? Mind has been in tension at work all day and needs a quick fix, right? So it is one thing that theory is one thing, it's another thing to practice. So the human beings are mind predominant jivas, right? And in the first stage we have to use that force, we have to address it with a positive mind, right? So at that stage the question will be whether I want to address it with a positive mind or a negative mind, right? A sadhaka should always be positive in any situation, right? So any situation the mind should be sakaratmak, should always be positive, right? So when the mind is positive and the person actually moves forward, when the mind is positive, then he gets the determination that yes, I can do this, and those are the people who get success. If the mind is negative, then, right, as I was saying, you manaha eva karanam bandasya karanam. So if the mind is negative, then that mind itself becomes the karana for his failure, right? So the mind can be karana for success or it can be a karana for failure. So it is very, very important, right? There are inner obstacles and then there are outer obstacles, right? So it's very important that in initial stages we have to understand the benefit of these things that we're talking about, and we have to make an effort to implement all of these things, right? Sometimes there could be opposition from the family to this new practice, and all the rest of the family is taking everything and you're the only one who is not taking, then it becomes even more difficult, right? If you're living with them, it becomes very difficult. So these are all external obstacles, right? There could be also all kinds of issues at home, right? So, and the family members are not supporting for whatever reason, right? So there are obstacles in the yatamana phase. There are obstacles coming from everywhere, and the question is, how do we deal with these in the initial phase, right? So a sadhaka has to welcome these obstacles. These obstacles are very important. They're very important obstacles because you have to go through that struggle. Without struggle you're not going to get anything, right? In the initial phase you have to go through the struggles, you have to win over these obstacles, and then you will move from the yatamana phase to the vyatireka phase, right? So initially in the takeoff phase, people always have a fear, right? They have pain in the ears, they have pain in the stomach, or they feel like vomiting, and all sorts of things happen when the plane is going to take off. Then after takeoff, then when the plane is going at a steady pace, then you feel comfortable. So essentially the first takeoff stage is the yatamana stage, and then when the plane is stabilized, that is the vyatireka stage, right? That is a vyatireka stage. The yatamana phase is particularly very difficult, and it requires a lot of perseverance, right? So that is essentially making sure we are implementing everything we have talked about and moving forward with a positive mind, right? It is just one thing to say that mind should be positive, right? But how can you generate that positivity, right? We can keep saying that mind has to be positive, but how do we generate that positivity? What is the basis of this positive mind, right? The yogic life, the whole yogic life, the sadhana, that is the basis of positive mind. So when one is engaged in concentrating on that supreme entity, automatically you start getting that positivity, right? So the positivity is that I am from a very high family, the highest family in the universe, because Paramapurusha is my father, right? So so that Paramapurusha, that supreme infinite consciousness, he is my father, and that gives us the positivity, that I have emanated from that supreme entity, the entity which is guiding the stars, right? Is also guiding me, is also helping me in every phase, is holding my hand, right? Just like a 3-year-old child in the market with his mother and father holding his hands, he becomes like a king, he becomes like a raja, right? Because there is nothing to fear, he just goes happily, right? On the other hand, if the child is all alone, just imagine how scared he would be, right? So like that, we should understand that Paramapurusha is holding your hand all the time, right? And we have to be positive, right? Paramapurusha has created this universe. I am in the Srishti Chakra. He wants that the Srishti Chakra should move forward. That means that I should move forward from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock, right? He wants it, right? Nothing can happen without his wish, without his desire. So whatever is happening according to his desire, right? So if I want to be successful implementing the yogic life, then I have the most powerful entity in the universe at my back, right? He wishes that I should be successful. So essentially we should have that positive mind in generating that feeling, right? That he is with me, he's holding my hand, he's helping me proceed forward. Then one will automatically get success, right? When the obstacles, whether inner or external obstacles, you will be able to easily handle those obstacles, right? You essentially took birth in this universe only to attain that infinite, right? We all have the Ananteshana. We have the desire to merge with that supreme entity, and that is the goal of human life, right? So we have gone through the animal life for ages, and our eyes are now opened, and now is a chance for us to move forward. So we should implement everything and move forward with a positive mind, right? So that is what I wanted to actually talk about, the different stages, right? So in Yatamana stage it is Anushasanam, and in the Vyatireka stage it is the Abhyasa and getting established, right? And then in the Ekendriya stage is a further progress. You have well established in it, you also get the Siddhis, which is not the goal of life. And then in the Vasikara stage, you have completely controlled all your vrittis, your mental propensities, you're fully focused on Paramapurusha, you're moving towards Paramapurusha, and you actually merge with that supreme entity, right? So in Ekendriya means the various Indriyas, they all get completely under control, right? So so in the beginning, none of the Indriyas were under control. They were all moving like wild horses, whereas in the Ekendriya phase, all the Indriyas get completely under control. And in the Vasikara phase, what happens is that not only the Indriyas under one's control, but also there is no possibility of degeneration. You never fall. You never in the Vasikara, you're completely established in the yogic path, and you have steadily progressed, and there is no fear of falling down from the path, right? So that is what there are 4 different stages for the spiritual progress. Okay, any thoughts or questions? Okay, so we have been reading the pravachan, how should human beings live in this world, right? So we saw that human beings emerged in the Srishti Chakra from at 10 o'clock, and our goal is to progress from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock. Human beings in this world, constantly we do actions, right? We are always doing either physical actions or mental actions. So we know that every action has a karma pala, right? There is no way to escape the karma pala, right? And you cannot avoid the karma pala by doing stuti or by doing, graha shanti or by doing anything else, right? You can only, increase the speed or reduce the speed with which you experience the karma pala. But whoever has done an action, he has to experience the karma pala. So like if you put your hand into fire, it is bound to get burnt, right? You cannot avoid that. Like that, if you do a karma, a good or a bad karma, then you have to bear the consequences. You cannot avoid it, right? So that is what we have talked about. And the so essentially this whole universe is actually a school for us, where we are learning. When you get the karma pala, it is actually teaching you how to avoid those mistakes in the future. So this whole universe is a university. It is actually educating us. And right, so that is what we talked about. So when a human being dies, what happens is that the mind and the jivatma, they don't die, they just leave the body. They leave the body, and the karma pala also resides in the mind. And until that mind and jivatma get a new body, that karma pala is in the mind. And when the jiva gets when that jivatma gets a new body, right, the mind then gets the shelter in the brain of that body. And that person starts experiencing the karma pala. That jiva starts experiencing the karma pala. So as long as the karma pala resides in the mind, one will continue to experience the karma pala, the result of all their the reaction to their past actions. And so that is what we have talked about so far. And in that pravachan, there is a last paragraph which we can read now, and we'll conclude that pravachan. So let me actually quickly share my screen. Okay, can you see?
Yes, Bhagini.
Okay, so also I actually wanted to clarify one thing, that when we in the last class, when we were talking about how it's not a good thing to do stuti uh, uh, stuti of Paramapurusha. The flattery of Paramapurusha is a useless thing, and it should not be done, right? So the question of whether it is with selfish intent or not, right? There is no need for any flattery or stuti or prayer to Paramapurusha, because the Paramapurusha is all-knowing entity. It knows what is good and what is bad. It knows what you need, right? So there is no need for any stuti or prayer. So whether it is with an intent of asking for something or not asking for something, the flattery or stuti or prayer is actually a useless thing. It's not required, because when you're doing that, it's essentially telling Paramapurusha that you don't know, what I need, you don't know, and that is why you're asking Paramapurusha for it. Therefore, so we also talked in this paragraph that prayer or flattering, right? Prayer or flattering is actually not the right approach for a sadhaka, right? So in that context, we have the last paragraph. Chandrasekhar Modi, do you want to take it?
Yes, Mahodi. The rule of Prakriti, that one has to bear the consequences of one's actions, must also have some purpose behind it for the welfare of the humanity. The purpose of the entire creation is to enable every unit to become emancipated. That is the great object of the qualified supreme entity in bringing about the creation, and hence it can only be called the great benefactor. Even though it is emancipated, it came under the influence of Prakriti for the welfare of every unit. Karmapala, or bearing the consequences of one's actions, has been made a very strict rule only for the welfare of human beings, as it is by means of this that he, Bhagwan, restrains human beings from evil actions and leads them to emancipation. God, by his punishments, teaches humans not to indulge in evil deeds, but humans, out of their ignorance, only blame him for inflicting pain and suffering. Blaming God for being partial and unkind and for inflicting pain and suffering, or even prayer and flattery for relief from suffering, are not correct courses to adopt. The wise take the pain and suffering as a lesson through which the great benefactor teaches them to refrain from evil actions and develop in them discrimination. Hence, abstaining from evil action is the action of the wise and the duty of every human being. So, in this concluding paragraph, it's again reiterating this thing of viveka, that humans should get that viveka. So it's trying to say that that the whole purpose of the Saguna Brahma creating the universe, or the Nirguna Brahma with the influence of Prakriti creating the universe, is for the welfare of every unit that comes out, that they make the journey from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock. And in that, the karma phala is a way of nudging the person to do the right thing. And all, one has to realize, the humans have to realize, is everything that happens is a result of their own action. They cannot, it's not a punishment from the Bhagavan. It is really the response to our own evil deeds, or that's done out of ignorance or otherwise. And we can't blame the Bhagavan for inflicting the pain and suffering. We can't blame the Bhagavan for being partial or unkind, or compared to what others are getting versus what one is getting. It's all the result of one's own action, and that whole philosophy or action nudges people to do the right thing, to stay away from evil deeds, and teaches them to develop the discrimination between the good and the evil, and the discrimination between the root cause of their own pain and suffering. And it's abstaining from the evil action is the wise thing to do, is the viveka one gets from the understanding the law of Prakriti.
Yes, Madhe, nicely said. So we come into this world, we take rebirth, right? We get rebirth in this world because we couldn't learn everything in the previous birth that we had to learn. By learn, what I mean is that ultimately becoming one with Parama Purusha, that we could not achieve in the prior life. That is why we have taken a rebirth, right? So what that means is essentially you have karma palas remaining, that you have not, abhukta pratikriya is there. That is why you have taken rebirth. That is why ultimately everybody who is alive today, why have we taken rebirth? Because we have not merged with that supreme entity, right? That is why we have taken rebirth. So the wise actually understand that this universe is created with the spirit of welfare, right? That ultimately all should become one with that supreme entity, with Parama Purusha. The entire system of this universe has been set up in such a way that it can facilitate this, right? So a lot of people in this world feel that this world is unjust, and they got the wrong end of the stick, and that they could not move ahead in their lives, right? So no doubt there are a lot of things in this world that there is a lot of exploitation, unhappiness, things are happening, at least in today's world, how the world is, right? So you know it's not we're not saying that there's no injustice in the world. It's not saying that. So if there is injustice in the world, we should fight against it. If somebody is a terrible dictator in a country, we should not just sit around and say, well, it's happening like this because Paramapurusha wants it, right? He wants it, that's why it has happened, otherwise it would not happen. It's not like that. So when so essentially, why we took birth because of our samskaras. Everything that is happening in this world is because of the samskaras, of different samskaras, right? So they take birth in this world, they get the bhoga, and then they burn the samskaras, and then they are able to move ahead in their lives. So there are a lot of things, terrible things that happen in this world, no doubt, but everything is happening according to the karya karana bhava. Everything is happening without a cause. There is no karyam, right? So we cannot blame. Paramapurusha has created a perfect system. We cannot blame Paramapurusha for anything. Everything is happening according to karya karana bhava. Everybody they are moving from 10 o'clock to everybody is either moving closer to Paramapurusha or they're going far away from Paramapurusha in the Srishti Chakra from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock. Some people are moving closer to the nucleus, some people are moving far away from the nucleus, right? So we are all we have all originated from Paramapurusha. We are all the santana of Paramapurusha. So we should all move ahead with the positive mind. So if we are experiencing the abhukta pratikriya, right, so it is actually a learning ground for us, right? If we are going through some suffering, it is a learning ground for us, and going through that suffering you come out stronger and you're able to move closer to Paramapurusha, right? So with that positive mind we have to go forward. We should have this attraction, deep feeling of attraction towards the Paramapurusha through Atma Moksha and Jagat Hit, right? Doing service to the society. So we cannot just blame God saying that Paramapurusha is partial and he's inflicting suffering for me and not for other people, or doing a stuti of Paramapurusha saying, oh, please relieve me from the suffering. All this is actually not correct. So we have to go through the karma pala. The the buddhiman will actually learn a lesson from the pain and suffering, and he will use it as a learning ground, and he will actually refrain from doing evil actions in the future, right? He will develop the viveka, as Moday was saying. He'll develop the viveka to know what is right and wrong, and also it helps him. It's a learning ground. He helps him to avoid doing such actions in the future, right? So Paramapurusha has designed this universe which is kalyanakari for everybody, right? He is a sarva kalyana janakaha, right? So he has the welfare of everybody, right? He is not partial to anybody. And if we are experiencing the karma pala, we are experiencing suffering, that is due to our own past actions, right? So nobody can blame Paramapurusha saying that he's partial, right? So if one is going through a suffering, it is because of their own past deeds, and we have to use that as a learning ground to rectify ourselves and move ahead. So that is what this paragraph, essentially this whole pravachan is talking about. How do we live in this world, right? We got birth. How do we live in this universe, right? So we have to there are laws of the prakriti. We have to work according to the laws of the design of the prakriti, and also we have to do sadhana to increase the reflection of consciousness. So how do we do that? We have to use the viveka and vairagya, right? Viveka and vairagya are two important things. They are vidya maya. By using the vidya maya, by using viveka and vairagya, we move forward. We go at a greater speed towards Paramapurusha. On the other hand, if we use the avidya maya, right, the shadripus and ashtapashas, then what happens? The mind gets degenerated and we fall from our path, right? So essentially it is in our hands whether we want to move towards Paramapurusha by doing sadhana and working according to the laws of Prakriti, or we want to go far away from Paramapurusha by not following the laws of Prakriti and not doing sadhana, then what happens is in the next birth our life will be worse than animals. So that is what this is saying, and we actually design our own life. So we have to bear the consequences of whatever we do, good or bad, right? And the actions are both physical and mental actions. So we saw all of that in this current Karapatra. So now we can actually move to the next one. What is the aim of humanity? This is the next Karapatra. So Pushpalata Bhagini, do you want to read?
Bhagini, Namaskaraha.
Namaskaraha.
What is the aim of humanity? The unveiling of the mystery of the creation shows that the qualified supreme entity, Saguna Brahma, is, in order to obtain emancipation from each of its units, has to bring about this creation. It has to become the crudest solid factor only to be able to divide to its subtle self into units. It shows that Saguna Brahma is an infinite knowing entity, Jnata, which being subtle, Jnata, which being subtle cannot be divided into units, as the creation is only the imagination, Kalpana of the infinite knowing entity, where it imagines itself divided into several parts. The creation also shows that this thought way of imagination originates in that only to merge back into that, and that humanity forms the tail end of this thought way. Human beings are therefore bound to merge sooner or later in the subtle Saguna Brahma, qualified supreme entity, in the course of its thought waves. Saguna Brahma being infinite and subtle, the separate identity of a human being, even as a subtle individual, cannot continue upon merging with that. There cannot be two similar identities, which when one is infinite and ends after merging, humans themselves become Saguna Brahma. We can take as an example a drop of water, which on mixing with a similar larger body of water in a tumbler, completely loses its identity as an individual drop and becomes one with the water in the tumbler. Similarly, an individual, like the drop, completely loses his or her individual identity on merging with the infinite supreme entity. So this essentially says about what is the aim of humanity. So we see the mystery of creation shows that the qualified supreme entity, or the Saguna Brahma, in order to emancipation of each of its units, has to bring about the creation. So it is a crudest form is now divided into the subtle form, and that subtle form, the units, has to merge back, has to come back to its thing and merge itself into the supreme entity. So all this, but it is an imagination only, and that imagination of the knowledge entity, where it is showing that the creation shows that the thought way of imagination originates to divide into several parts, and these several parts merge back to form into the supreme entity, or the Saguna Brahma. So the thought waves are created into a single unit, but this single unit has no identity of its own. So it has to come, it has to be, that is, the Saguna Brahma is infinite and subtle. So that infinite actually divides, but again, that the division which becomes the units have to merge. It loses its identity when it merges back. So the individual unit has no identity of its own. Like a drop of water, when it is existing alone, when it is put in a tumbler, or when it is the tumbler, it loses its identity as a drop of water, and there are many drops of water inside the tumbler. So finally the individual entity is only merging with the supreme entity, with the infinite supreme entity, and that individual entity has no identity of its own. This paragraph essentially says that.
Bhagini, nicely said. So there is essentially a lot said in this paragraph. So, we are talking about what is the aim of humanity, right? So we have been talking a lot about yogic life so far, right? So we have talked that human beings have an infinite desire, right, that cannot be satisfied by the finite things of the world. And we talked about that it can only be satisfied by something which is infinite, and that infinite entity is only one, right? The infinite cannot be two. If the infinite is two, then neither of them is infinite. So infinite by definition is only one, right? So you need to talk a little bit more about the nature of that infinite entity into which the human beings wish to merge, and what happens when that occurs, right? So this Parama Purusha, this infinite entity, is only one, right? So this entity, this Parama Purusha, who is a very, very subtle entity, and we see this world which is very, very crude, right? So we talked about how can this crude entity, how can the seed of this crude entity be in that subtle entity which is Parama Purusha. We concluded that the seed of the crude universe cannot be in Parama Purusha, who is subtle, right? So we said that ultimately that this whole Srishti is an imagination in the mind of Parama Purusha. So when Parama Purusha gave permission to Prakriti, the qualifying entity, she starts doing her work, and with that this whole Srishti comes into being, right? So there is a certain desire that there is a desire in that infinite entity to create this Srishti, to create this unit, so that all the Jivatmas can get ultimately emancipated. So that is the ultimate lakshya, right? So in order for the things to go back to the source from which they got created, right? So this essentially this whole Srishti is a leela of Parama Purusha, so that the Jivatma can go back and merge into the Supreme, right? So in order for that leela to occur, he has to create these units, right, which have the capability of being separate. In order for that separation to happen, it needs the crudification. He needs to move from the subtle to the crude, right? So we saw that in the Srishti Chakra, how he moves from the subtle to the crude. The cosmic mind gets created, and then the Panchabhutas get created, and ultimately the Kshiti Tattva, which is the crudest and which is capable of being separated, right? So that is where the separation happens. Until that, the separation doesn't happen. The separation cannot happen in Akasha or Vayu Tattva or other Tattvas. It can only happen in the Kshiti Tattva, right? So right, so that is what we actually talked about. And so ultimately this process of crudification, moving from the subtle to the crude at 6 o'clock at the Kshiti Tattva, when the pressure of Tamoguna increases, then ultimately the jivas emerge, and from single-celled organisms, slowly they evolve and they progress to multicellular organisms, and then plants and animals, and then finally at 10 o'clock we have the human beings. So the human beings have an opportunity of moving from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock, right? So this is all the play of the this is all play of prakriti, right? So successively to the impact of the sattva guna, rajoguna and tamo guna, the cosmic mind gets created, and then the panchabhutas, and then the jivas emerge. From 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock, it is a movement from the crude to the subtle, right? So this whole universe, they have a relative reality. This whole universe is not a dream like a human being has, right? The human being goes to sleep at night. They have a dream that nobody else sees. So but this Parama Purusha's Jagat, right? It is having a relative reality, even though it is a kalpana in the mind of Parama Purusha, but it's still a kalpana, right? And we live in this reality, right? We live in this kalpana, right? So we cannot call this Jagat as mithya. So there is a relative reality, right? The sapekshika satyatvam vartate, right? So that is what this paragraph is actually talking about, that this Parama Purusha imagines that it divides itself into several parts, and going through the different Kshiti Tattva, going through different tattvas, and then finally coming to the Kshiti Tattva and allowing itself to get divided into many units, so that ultimately those units can merge into that supreme entity. So all of this is happening through the struggle, right? This is through the sangarsha. This is through the sangarsha that this is happening from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock. All the different beings, plants and animals, and then at 10 o'clock human beings, right? So that is the tail end of the thought wave, and so everything is happening in the Bhuma Man, in the chitta of Parama Purusha, right? So we are now getting what is the aim of humanity, right? So the human beings take the form at 10 o'clock, and what is their job? Their job is to follow their Manava Dharma, right? And at 10 o'clock we also saw that the speciality of human beings is that we have the Swatantra Ichcha, right? We have a choice whether we want to follow the Manav Dharma or we want to follow the Pasu Dharma. That kind of choice was not available to the animals, right? So if we follow the path of Manava Dharma, then we move from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock, right? Ultimately, every human being, that is what we want to do, whether we do it today or we do it later in our life or in next janma, right? So that is what the Nirguna Purusha wants, right? So that is what the Saguna Brahma wants, that every jiva move forward, right? Every jiva merge into that supreme entity, right? And also there's it also talking about just like how Bhagini was saying that there's a drop of water, and when it mixes with a large body of water in a tumbler, then it loses its identity. Or we can also say, like, there's a doll of salt. If you put it in the ocean, how it just loses its identity. It just loses identity. It just merges with the water. Like that, the jivatma merges with that supreme entity, with that cosmic entity, right? So as we think, so we become, right? If we are engaged in the thoughts of Paramapurusha, then eventually we take on the qualities of that supreme entity, right? So ultimately we merge with that supreme entity. So now we have to find out whether that goal has been fulfilled or not. Like, what is the aim of the humanity? That is what the title of this Karapatra is. So as the human being thinks, as he thinks, so he becomes, right? So as a result of intense sadhana, the mind of the unit entity becomes just like the mind of the cosmic entity. And as a drop of water merges into the ocean, so the mind of a human being merges into the mind of the cosmic, right? So that is what this paragraph is talking about. Let's actually go to the next paragraph. Shubham Bhagini, do you want to read the next paragraph?
Yes, Bhagini. The merger of unit consciousness with the qualified supreme entity does not completely fulfill the purpose of the creation. Unit consciousness, before it is able to achieve the non-qualified rank, Nirguna, is merged with the qualified entity Saguna Brahma and loses its identity by becoming the qualified supreme entity itself. this defeats the very purpose of the qualified supreme entity in manifesting the creation. This paragraph is saying that that merging of unit consciousness with qualified supreme entity uh, does not have any does not fulfill completely the purpose of creation of universe. Like before achieving the nirgun brahma, unit consciousness have to merge with sagun brahma and lose its identity by becoming one with sagun brahma. And by this merging, the purpose of this defeats the purpose of sagun brahma in manifesting the creation. Bhagini, is it saying that it is against like the purpose of sagun brahma?
Yeah, the purpose of this srishti is that so that every unit being merges with that nirguna purusha, right? So that is the ultimate goal of the srishti, that every jivatma merges with that nirguna purusha. But so there are actually two things over here, right? So a sadhaka is doing sadhana with their mind, right? The sadhana is going on in their mind. I'm just going to mute you for a minute, Bhagini. There's some background noise. Okay, so a sadhaka is doing sadhana using their mind, and as you think, so you become, right? When you're doing sadhana, you're doing the sadhana on the infinite cosmic mind, right? That infinite cosmic mind is what is called as the saguna brahma, right? The saguna brahma. So you're thinking about saguna brahma, your mind is thinking about saguna brahma, and you're becoming like saguna brahma. So the mind is becoming more and more and more and more like saguna brahma through doing sadhana. So ultimately that is what happens. So normally human beings, we have all kinds of imperfections in our minds, right? There are a lot of like all kinds of impurities in our mind, whereas the cosmic mind, it doesn't have any imperfections, it has no impurities. So what happens by doing sadhana, by meditating on the cosmic mind, it is becoming more and more and more and more like the cosmic mind. It is moving from the path of imperfection to perfection, right? So unit mind is becoming like the cosmic mind, and ultimately the mind becomes sukshma, right? And it gets so attracted to the cosmic mind, right? So then when the mind gets more and more sukshma, there comes a point where the mind can no longer remain separate from the cosmic mind, and it merges into the cosmic mind, right? All the impurities and everything are removed, and the unit mind merges with the cosmic mind. So here what we are talking about is the cosmic mind is the saguna brahma, right? So the unit mind anuman becomes one with the bhumaman, becomes one with the cosmic mind, right? So why are we saying that it defeats the very purpose of srishti? It's because the goal is to merge with that nirguna brahma, right? And that nirguna brahma is an entity that has no limitations. It has no limitations. It is completely shuddha purusha, right? So when the unit mind is and the shuddha purusha doesn't have a mind, right? So so by merging with the cosmic mind, is not an easy thing, right? By merging with the cosmic mind, what happens is that you get processed in the srishti chakra again, right? If let's say that you merge your mind, unit mind, into the cosmic mind, right, at the time of death, you don't have punarjanma, you don't have rebirth, right? And that is actually called as mukti. You're merging your unit mind into the anuman, into the bhumaman at the time of death. Then you don't have punarjanma, but then what happens is that you get recycled in the srishti chakra, So if you are part of the Bhumaman, then that Bhumaman is again getting converted into Panchabhutas, and then from Panchabhutas again Jiva emerge. So it is creating again Srishti, right? But ultimately what our goal of life is to merge with that Nirguna Purusha, so that the Srishti, we don't get recycled in the Srishti. Right? So there is even this is actually called as moksha. At the time of death, when the Jiva merges with that Nirguna Purusha, then there is no rebirth, there is no punarjanma, right? And you are also not getting recycled in the Srishti Chakra, right? Both Mukti and Moksha are both, very elevated thing. It's not like that Mukti is not an elevated thing. Mukti is also an elevated thing, but the purpose for which that Parama Purusha created this Srishti is so that every unit being merged with that Nirguna Purusha, right? So, but when your unit mind merges with the cosmic mind, that doesn't achieve the purpose for which he created this universe, right? So that is why they're saying that it defeated the purpose, because if it merged with Saguna, right, whereas it has to merge with Nirguna. So once it merges with the Saguna, when the Anuman merges with the Bhumaman, then what happens is that portions of Saguna Brahma are always getting recycled through the Srishti, right? So then that it once moved into 12 o'clock, then goes to 1 o'clock, then goes, it's not in the same form, right? So let's say that one Mr. Shyam was doing sadhana, right? So then Shyam was doing sadhana, and his unit mind got merged with the cosmic mind, right? Then it is getting recycled into the Srishti Chakra, not necessarily as Shyam, but as a different Jiva, right? That Jiva that he was before, that Jiva is now merged into the Saguna Brahma. So that Jiva is no longer there, but it's still getting recycled in the Srishti Chakra, where there could be further progress in the Srishti Chakra, right? So he is not existing in the current self. He doesn't exist like that in his current self anymore, but he becomes the samagri, he becomes the material, right? He becomes that very mind stuff of the cosmic mind, right? So the cosmic mind are getting constantly recycled to the Srishti. They go through 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, etc., right? They become the Chitta, they become the Panchabhutas, right? So from the Akasha to Akshiti Tattva, right? So they actually become the Samagri. So ultimately we don't want to become the Samagri of the Srishti. We want to merge with the supreme entity, which is the Nirguna Purusha, right? So that is what is a true merger. Is that making sense, Bhagini?
Yes, Bhagini.
Okay. Okay, so we'll just take this one paragraph. Chandrasekhar Mahodaya, do you want to take this?
Yes, Bhagini. The wish of the qualified supreme entity is to obtain merger with a non-qualified entity or the supreme rank for every one of its units. This is not fulfilled on merger of unit consciousness with it either through the effort of doing sadhana, intuitional practice, or in the natural course of the flow of the thought waves of the qualified entity. This merger with the qualified supreme entity is termed mukti, which means freedom from the movement of the thought waves of the supreme from the creation. This mukti or freedom is not emancipation in reality. Unit consciousness emerges out of the subtle qualified supreme entity in its thought waves and re-enters the Srishti Chakra or Brahma Chakra, cycle of creation or cosmic cycle, returning again to the path of emancipation. So, such a mukti is not complete emancipation, since the intention of the qualified supreme entity to achieve the non-qualified status for each one of its unit has not been fulfilled. I think this paragraph again reiterates what we had just been mentioning and talking about, is that that the Saguna Brahma really wants every one of those entities to reach the Nirguna Brahma, but it doesn't happen. They merge back into Saguna Brahma either by, through the sadhana and thinking about the Saguna Brahma all the time, or the Paramapurusha all the time, or in the natural course of the flow of the thought waves of the qualified entity. By that we mean, because we said the whole creation could be viewed as virtual thought waves of Saguna Brahma, and every one of the creation is nothing but just thought waves, and the humans are at the end of those thought waves, and the natural termination of the thought waves could be that it merges back into the Saguna Brahma, and then that still doesn't. So this form, this action is called mukti, where the individual unit consciousness attains mukti and merges with Saguna Brahma. But this is not the emancipation that Saguna Brahma was trying to see happen. Saguna Brahma wanted every one of these units to merge back into Nirguna Brahma, and so the mukti is not really a complete emancipation. It doesn't address, or it doesn't this thing satisfy the intention of Saguna Brahma to get all the individual units to be part of Nirguna Brahma.
Yes, Mohan. Yeah, nicely said. So the question is like, why does the unit consciousness go and merge into the Saguna Brahma is the question, right? So that could be a question. So essentially there are different phases of sadhana, right? The initial, each of the phases is very important. The initial phase of sadhana we call as the Ishvara Pranidhana, right? Ishvara Pranidhana. It is the sadhana of the Saguna Brahma and not the Nirguna Brahma. That initial phase, the Ishvara Pranidhana, is a very, very powerful sadhana, right? It's a very powerful sadhana, but it is we're coming into the sharanam of, we're taking the shelter of Ishvara, Saguna Brahma. Saguna Brahma means Ishvara. So in the first phase, in the first stage of sadhana, Ishvara Pranidhana, we are coming under the shelter of Saguna Brahma. If we, in that sadhana, if we merge with that Saguna Brahma, then, right, it is the merging of the unit with the Saguna Brahma and not with the Nirguna Brahma. So when we merge with the Saguna Brahma, what happens is that again we go into the Srishti Chakra. Like we repeat the cycle, we go on repeating in the cycle of Janma and Marana. So even though that unit consciousness is not getting rebirth, but it becomes a samagri for the Srishti, right? So that is not the essence of what the Supreme Consciousness wants for the unit. It wants the unit consciousness to get completely emancipated and merged into the Nirguna Brahma. So that is why in the previous paragraph is saying that, merging into the Saguna Brahma defeats the purpose of this creation, right? Even though this creation is a kalpana, the essence of this creation is that all the unit consciousness merge into the Nirguna Brahma. That was the purpose of the creation. So in the following paragraph, what we are saying is that when they get a human body and a human mind, and with that human body and human mind, they sit to do sadhana and follow the full yogic life, have implemented all the aspects of yogic life, then the mind begins to take the shape of that supreme entity on which it is ideating, right? So if it is ideating on the Saguna Brahma, it's a sadhana of the Saguna Brahma, right? Then it merges with that Saguna Brahma. The qualified consciousness is the cosmic mind, is the Bhumaman, right? So within that cosmic mind, this entire Srishti is there. By doing the sadhana of Saguna Brahma, the mind becomes more and more and more like the Saguna Brahma, and it cannot remain apart from the Saguna Brahma, and it merges into that. The mind becomes more subtle, right? That is when the samskaras can get completely burnt. Right? The samskaras get completely burnt. There is a Dagda Bija Avastha, right? So the mind is completely got mukti from all the samskaras, right, from the bondages. So there is nothing to keep the mind in bondage, and that Saguna Brahma also without limitation. Saguna Brahma is also infinite, right? So but the Saguna Brahma is different. It is a different functional role of the Nirguna Brahma. So when it merges into the Saguna Brahma, we call it as Mukti, right? So up until Mukti, the samskaras were pushing you to take rebirth, right? Which the samskaras were all in the mind, and the mind was bound, right? The mind was limited, right? So the Jivatma is now forced to take rebirth along with that unit mind due to the samskaras, due to the abhukta pratikriya. But when the mind ultimately takes the form of the Saguna Brahma, right, then those limitations are all gone, they're finished, and that is what is called as Mukti. That is Mukti. So Mukti is not a small thing. It is not to be minimized, right? Although it is described here that it's not the ultimate goal, that is a true statement. But it is not that it is a small thing, right? It is really a big thing. Getting Mukti is not a small thing. If somebody doesn't get Mukti, then they will have to take rebirth either as a human being or as a cow or as a horse or a plant or a stone, depending on the quality of the mind at the time of death, right? But when a Jivatma gets Mukti, the cycle of rebirth is finished, and that is not a small thing, right? So that is why we call it as Mukti. Mukti is freedom from rebirth, and that mind is no longer having that unit form. It becomes part of the cosmic mind. The unit mind became cosmic mind. So the present existence is finished, and it will never take a rebirth. However, by merging into the cosmic mind, by merging into the Saguna Brahma, right, so that it becomes samagri, it becomes the raw material for the Srishti to happen, right? It just gets recycled, just like the water goes into the river and then goes into the ocean, and it gets evaporated into the air and then becomes cloud, and then it rains into the river, and then it goes to the ocean. Just like that recycling is happening with water, it merges into the ocean, then it evaporates and then goes into the cloud. So the process is going on. So in the same way, the Purusha of which everything is made, right? So it just merges into the cosmic mind, and that unit mind is now freed up from the samskaras, and it merges into the cosmic mind, and it becomes the samagri for the Srishti, right? So now you're no longer you is finished, right? That is what happens in a Mukti. So you just become the ingredient, just like the river merges into the ocean. Now it is evaporated into the cloud. So you're becoming a part of the cosmic mind, right? And then portion of you becomes Akasha Tattva, and then it becomes Vayu Tattva, Agni Tattva, Jala Tattva, Kshiti Tattva, and moves on, right? That is different from taking rebirth. That has to be understood. So that means you got Mukti. That was accomplished. It's not a small thing. There is no Punar Janma there also, right? So so that is essentially Mukti is merging with the Saguna Brahma and becoming part of the Srishti in a new form. That old you is gone, right? So it is not actually a small thing. But the wish of Paramapurusha is not to get is not for you to get Mukti, even though it is not a small thing. But it's not for you to get Mukti, but it is for you to merge with the Nirguna Purusha, right? It is merged with the Nirguna Purusha. That is what is actually the goal of life, right? So So that is what this paragraph is actually talking about. So that is why he's saying this Satya Mukti is not a complete emancipation, since the intention of qualified entity is to achieve the non-qualified status for each of its units that has not been fulfilled. So this paragraph is talking about mukti. So there are two things, mukti and moksha. So far we talked about mukti. We can talk about the moksha in the following paragraph in the next class. So any thoughts or questions? Okay, I assume everything is clear. So we'll go on from here. So we can conclude the session over here. Dhanyavadah, Namaskaraha.
धन्यवादः
नमस्कारः भगिनी।
Dhanyavadah, Namaskaraha.